Okay, I'm going to begin the presentation now. Thank you very much for joining us in this breakout room. Today I'm going to share the research that I've done on water quality studies in the Singapore context. Now, before I begin, I would like to acknowledge two of my colleagues who worked very closely with me on the project and who have actually left NIE. Associate Professor Kim Irvin is a hydrologist who was the co-PI on this project. He is now based in Thammasat University in Bangkok. And Mr. Julian Chang was a seconded teacher at NIE who is now teaching geography at Temasek JC. I could not have completed this project without their input and support. I wish they could be here with me. Um, Before I begin sharing on the research and research findings, let me first start by framing the work within the notion of signature pedagogies. What exactly is signature pedagogies and how is it linked to inquiry-based learning? Now, in 2005, Shulman conceptualized signature pedagogies as the types of teaching that organize the fundamental ways in which future practitioners, in this case geographers, are educated for their new professions. So what we have here is a movement away from generic teaching strategies towards a reconceptualization of pedagogy, what the teacher or how the teacher chooses to teach in the classroom as a means to understand and practice disciplinary ways of thinking. Now, a signature pedagogy has three levels. Firstly, it consists of teachers' concrete operational teaching and learning practices. This is what Shulman calls surface structures and something that we can see. Okay, it is what the teacher is doing in the class, and we can observe the students enacting in the class as well. However, a signature pedagogy has also two other levels that we need to be cognizant of. Firstly, the implicit structure, which is teachers' professional values, beliefs, and attitudes about their craft, and the deep structure, which is the teacher's deep structural understandings about knowledge in their subjects. Together, these dimensions shape the discipline's habits of the mind, which is the subject matter, habits of the heart, which is the discipline's values, and habits of the hands, which is the procedural processes or skills that are important to the discipline. All right, so what is the background to this study? In Singapore, as you are all aware, the inquiry approach is the preferred pedagogy, not just in the classroom, which we've heard so much about earlier, but in the field as well. And we argue that field-based inquiry, or what we call geographical investigations, is a type of signature pedagogy that mirrors how geographers think about the world and construct knowledge of the world, by going out there to inquire about the world in which we live. So I'm going to really skip through this part. Yeah, all our students have to take 1 GI per year throughout their secondary and A-level education. And the topics that they can choose is shown here on the table. And today we're focusing on the secondary one topic of water quality. So what were we trying to find out really when we were doing research on field-based inquiry? Well, first of all, we wanted to know what teachers know about the discipline and about the topic. So we are focused on the implicit and deep structures that we can't really see, okay, but which we had to find out. We also wanted to know how teachers were designing and conducting geographical investigation. So this is the surface structure which we could observe. And we wanted to see what were the links among these different dimensions. Why did we care about this? Because we wanted to know as well what challenges teachers were facing and how we can better support teachers in carrying out this geographical investigation with their students. So this is the topic of water quality, and these are the questions that students are supposed to engage with when conducting GI in secondary 1. We also, let me just add that we also conducted GI in the Jurong Eco Garden. This is The reason why we did this was because it's near the university and we had partnered schools who were interested to also use this particular site to conduct their water quality studies. In terms of methodology, we worked with 4 schools with different student profiles and 6 teachers who had a range of teaching experience. We used a range of methods to understand teachers' knowledge. This included concept mapping, photograph and card ranking and sorting, and structured interviews. We also, in order to understand the practice, what teachers were actually doing, we also looked at structured interviews and lesson observations. Now, I just like to go to the Mentimeter poll that you did earlier and share with you some of your responses to the different options. Well, I can see that the focus of many of us here today, well, we focus on everything, obviously, but getting students to understand the relevance of what they are learning. Yeah, the applied learning dimension is really important to us, followed by the values dimension. And then disciplinary concepts, deepening of water quality, content knowledge, and research are slightly less important, although still important. Okay, so going back to our findings, how did the teachers compare, okay, relative to what you selected? Just give me a moment. All right, so like the poll, okay, we found that there were some differences and similarities in teachers' points of view, just like, there was a range in your responses as well. We found that all the teachers agreed that GI provided a good meta framework to structure students' learning experiences. The concrete operational acts of collecting and testing primary data allowed students to encounter the messiness of the real world, right? And to apply what they had learned in the geography classroom. So this very strong link, right, through this signature pedagogy, so that students are able to actually see the link between what they're doing and the real world. And this is something that all the teachers agreed on, and which actually featured really strongly in our very casual poll. There was also a strong support for GI as a way to induct students into ways of thinking and doing geography. Although there was this similarity, we also found some diversity in what teachers chose to emphasize when they were doing GI. Now, this is despite the fact that the Geog unit had developed very detailed GI packages, and NIE had also conducted broad training for Sec 1 teachers, roughly based on these packages. Teachers still did quite different things or emphasized quite different things when they went to the field with their students. For instance, teacher 1 from school 1 really focused on the concept of accuracy. He felt that it was very important that students collected accurate data. Now, teacher 4, however, chose to focus more on disciplinarity. So she hopes that through doing the GI, students will understand geography better and understand that geographical concepts are what makes geography geography. In contrast, we have teacher 5, who actually was more focused on the values dimension, right? She wanted the students to understand that water is a precious resource, having clean water is not to be taken for granted, and she hoped that they would be responsible citizens. So what did we make of these different emphases? And I think the data suggested that there might be a link between what teachers were emphasizing and teachers' prior academic specialization and teaching subjects or their subject identity. So teacher 1, the one that actually focused on accuracy, he is a scientist by training, and what he privileged was scientific rigor and rigor in data collection in GI. Now, teacher 3 over here only taught geography. She is a geographer by training all the way, and she focused less on scientific rigor and more on how GI helps students to understand and apply disciplinary concepts like space, place, and environment. Now, teacher 5 teaches social studies and is a sociology by training, and she was more concerned with citizenship and responsible citizenship when she was teaching students about this issue. But despite their their emphasis, teachers also face very similar challenges in enacting GI as a signature pedagogy. So for instance, teachers tended to opt for very teacher-directed approaches. Okay, they wanted to generate the inquiry question and guiding questions. They provided all the secondary data and information for their students, and they selected the sampling sites and fieldwork methods. Teachers said that this was due to time and resource constraints, right? In order for students to lead the inquiry, students need to be familiar with the site, but you can't take the students to the site more than once. And there were also concerns about student readiness and safety. Another challenge was the fact that field-based inquiry relies heavily on the integration of theory and practice, and teachers felt they lacked the necessary subject content knowledge on water quality. And they felt that they had problems with the different water quality indicators, how these indicators interacted to affect water quality, and how they fluctuated over time. So we have a quote here from the teacher who just says that, this is the teacher that focuses on disciplinarity. She felt she wasn't really able to focus on this part because she lacked knowledge of the content. Another thing that was really interesting in field-based inquiry is that teachers felt they lacked place-based knowledge about the site, which led to difficulties in developing appropriate inquiry questions and hypotheses, and in selecting appropriate sampling sites. So if you look at the water flows within the Jurong Eco Garden here, as seen on the map, you will see that the water actually flows from higher ground here, down into this pond, from higher ground here into this pond, and here. Now, the water from these two ponds then go through this cleansing biotope, after which it flows into this pond and then out of the water catchment. So what teachers did, and that makes complete sense, is they designed GI that got their students to compare water quality at X and Y with water quality at Z, which is after the cleansing biotope. Right, and this is because the teachers felt that there would be drastic difference, and there would be changes in things like oxygen, but they were also saying that they were not familiar with the site, and so this was their best guess. Found was that the teachers did not notice the following features of the water catchment. For instance, they didn't see that water in Z is actually pumped back to X and Y, and that this information is actually available on a notice board in the park. They also didn't notice that there is a large drain here that actually drains water from this part of the catchment directly into Z. Together, this means that comparing the water at X and Y against Z might not yield any meaningful results in the student's GI. So then that leads to the question of, okay, so we've seen all of this. How can we then support teachers better? And basically what we did was we tried to see how we can help them to align their professional dispositions, beliefs, attitudes, and deep understandings of geography with the concrete operational processes that they were actually employing. And so this is what the teachers believed, right, about GI, what they believed about geography, what they believed about what was important about this water quality study, and what they were actually doing with their students. And we felt that perhaps it would be most useful to support teachers in their desire for more student-directed GI. And this is something they all shared, and they expressed that they hope they would be able to do, as well as to address gaps in water quality content knowledge and gaps in place-based knowledge. So the Sustainability Learning Lab was actually designed as a fieldwork site with an accompanying website with content developed in partnership with schools. Before I tell you a little bit more about this, you can actually find out much more about this whole project at this particular website. Which shares, where OER actually shares funded project results or NIE projects with our stakeholders. And this site also will include links to journal articles that were written up from this piece of research. Okay, so the website actually contains lesson resources and accompanying videos on the different stages of the inquiry cycle to help teachers in planning for and carrying out the GI for this specific site. We also made videos that enable students to prepare more independently for the field work. So if they watch these videos, they have a better understanding of what these different water quality indicators mean and how they are relevant to their research. And there are also maps of the place that would also help students to perhaps make decisions about sampling. Finally, we also provided quality teacher-friendly information on the different water quality indicators that are pitched appropriately for water quality studies in the GI for Secondary 1. We hoped that these would actually help teachers. But one thing to note is that the Sustainability Learning Lab was developed to support inquiry-based learning, and that project ended some time ago. And we're actually now pivoting towards redeveloping the Sustainability Learning Lab for sustainability research and sustainability education research. However, the materials that are here will still continue to be featured in the relaunched SLL website. Okay, so I've shared the findings and the implications, but I think that moving away from what was done in the SLL, I'd really like to hear from you. And I'd like you to consider what other approaches can be or have been adopted by yourselves or by your schools to facilitate the adoption of GI as a signature pedagogy, as well as what questions you might have.